There are faces that appear on the screen, and when the theater lights go out, they remain in our memory. It could be a sudden smile, a defiant glance, or a line of dialogue that still echoes today. Those moments do not belong only to cinema. They become part of the audience's lives, tied to the memories of a youthful era. And Tom Cruise is one of those rare names. With bright eyes filled with determination, with a smile that is half defiant and half sincere, Cruise conquered audiences not only with his captivating looks, but with the intensity he brought to every role. He didn't just appear in famous movies. He became the symbol of a dazzling Hollywood, where the American dream once burned brightest. Remember Top Gun in 1986, the image of pilot Maverick in his flight suit, flying the F-14 jet into the clear blue sky, etched itself into the minds of millions of viewers. Or the scene of Jerry Maguire shouting, "Show me the money," in the mid-90s, like a declaration of the hunger and passion of that era. But behind those unforgettable roles, behind the blockbuster films, there wasn't always just glory. Tom Cruise's path, from a poor boy in Syracuse, New York, to the world's biggest movie star, is a journey of contradictions, ambition, and extraordinary willpower. He once struggled with dyslexia, was looked down upon at school, endured an unstable childhood marked by broken families. Hollywood was never meant to open its arms to a boy like that. Yet from what seemed like a fragile foundation, Cruise found the drive to never back down. And when he was already at the peak, he still faced controversies, skepticism, even times when Hollywood itself turned its back on him. Yet again and again, Tom Cruise came back. With impossible stunts, he insisted on performing himself, with an endurance that few in the industry could sustain over 4 decades. The box office triumph of Top Gun: Maverick in 2022 was not only the continuation of a legend, but proof that Cruise is still here, still vibrant, still stepping onto the screen to remind us of the power of perseverance. But the question for all of us is, what turned a boy nearly left behind in the classroom into one of the greatest movie stars the world has ever known? To understand that, we need to turn back time. Back to 1962, in a small town in New York State, where a baby boy named Thomas Cruise Mapother IV was born. Thomas Cruise Mapother IV was born on July 3, 1962, in Syracuse, New York. It was a hot summer day, but the small house where the Cruise family lived was filled with hidden storms. Tom's father, an electrical engineer, was intelligent but quick-tempered, with sudden bursts of anger that kept the whole family in constant fear. His mother, a strong but overburdened woman, was the only support for her 4 children. From a young age, Tom witnessed his mother working tirelessly to support the family while enduring the instability of her husband. Later, Cruise would bluntly call his father a coward and a betrayer. He recalled, "He could pretend to be caring, then suddenly slap or hit you. That was the trap. He made you believe you were loved, then betrayed that trust." Family life was a series of endless moves. Tom almost never stayed in one place long enough to call it home. Each time he began to make friends, to feel like he belonged somewhere, the family would move again. By the time he grew up, Tom had gone through more than a dozen different schools. In the classroom, the small, frail boy faced a silent struggle: dyslexia. The lines of text on a page slipped away from his eyes, turning into an incomprehensible jumble. When teachers asked him to read aloud, Tom would blush, stumble over the words, and become the class joke. Adults saw him as a poor student. Classmates regarded him with pity or distance. Yet in that isolation, Tom developed a quiet but fierce longing to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be told he had worth. He once said, "If there's one thing my childhood taught me, it's that you can't rely on anyone else. You have to get up, fight, and find a way to survive." Then one day, during high school, Tom stumbled upon an unexpected escape. The theater stage. A school play needed actors, and the skinny boy who usually kept to the back of the class was suddenly encouraged to audition. When the curtain closed and the spotlight shone down, something miraculous happened. On stage, Tom was no longer the struggling student lost among letters. He became the character, lived inside the role, and for the first time in his life, he felt the power of being heard, of being seen. The audience, his friends and teachers, no longer laughed. They fell silent, then applauded. In that moment, Tom realized he could command a room, he could stir emotions, he could be recognized. After the performance, young Tom Cruise returned to his small room, but a great dream had already taken root. Each time he stepped onto the stage, Tom felt stronger, more confident, and most importantly, free from the fragile shadow of his childhood. When Tom was 12, his mother left her abusive husband, taking Tom and his sisters to start over elsewhere. It was a liberating turning point, but it also left a deep void in the boy's heart. By age 16, his father had died of cancer. Cruise never had the chance to reconcile, but from that moment, he vowed to live a different life, never to follow in his father's footsteps. And so, after years of hardship, Tom made a bold decision. He would not live an ordinary life. He would leave the small town, step into the world, and chase the dream of becoming an actor. Few could have imagined that the skinny, struggling boy who once drifted from place to place with his mother and sisters was about to write one of the brightest chapters in Hollywood. In the early 1980s, Tom Cruise took his first steps down that path. They were hesitant, uncertain steps, but filled with determination. A path that would lead him to his first films, and then to worldwide fame. At 18, Tom Cruise had nothing in his hands except a dream bigger than himself. He left his small town with an old suitcase, a bit of money from odd jobs, and an almost stubborn belief: I have to make something of myself. At first, Tom tried his luck in New York. He shared a cramped apartment with other young actors, scraping by with odd jobs, waiting tables, washing dishes, fixing things, just to afford rent. But whatever he did, he saved every spare dollar to take acting classes or print more headshots to send to casting agencies. With a modest height of under 5'7" and looks that didn't stand out compared to Hollywood's standards at the time, Tom was often rejected at first sight. Casting directors would sometimes shake their heads before he even opened his mouth. But Tom didn't back down. He patiently returned, auditioned again, each time better than before. One fellow actor recalled, he had a kind of grit few people had. No matter how many times he was turned away, Tom came back with the same burning energy. In 1981, Tom landed his first role in Endless Love. It was just a tiny part, a fleeting moment on screen. But for Tom, it was a signal that he had placed one foot inside Hollywood. He once shared, "The moment I saw my name in the credits, even though it was tiny, I knew all the effort wasn't meaningless." That same year, a bigger opportunity arrived with Taps. At first, Tom was given a very minor role. But in one scene with the young cast, he delivered such explosive energy that director Harold Becker stopped filming and took notice. Impressed by Tom's intensity, Becker expanded his role, giving him more presence than originally planned. It was a small but precious turning point. On the set of Taps, Tom proved what he always believed: that effort and total commitment could make people notice you, even when no one expected anything at first. But Tom didn't stop there. He understood that to survive in Hollywood, he had to stand out. He began to build a style, not just acting, but being willing to throw himself into anything that made a role feel real. In 1983, Tom was cast in Francis Ford Coppola's The Outsiders, a film that gathered an entire generation of young talents who would become stars. Among a cast full of bright names like Patrick Swayze, Matt Dillon, Rob Lowe, and Ralph Macchio, Tom wasn't a standout. But he rose to notice because of his dedication, sometimes to the point of recklessness. There's a famous behind-the-scenes story. In one scene, Tom's character had to perform a flip. Instead of waiting for a stunt double, Tom insisted on doing it himself. He said, "I want the audience to see it's me. I want them to believe I was really there." The flip succeeded, and from then on, the name Tom Cruise began to be tied to the image of an actor who never shied away from danger. Though only a supporting role in The Outsiders, Tom made one thing clear: he wasn't just another pretty face passing through. He was someone willing to pour everything into etching every moment onto the screen. And then, finally, destiny came calling with Risky Business in 1983. This time, Tom had a leading role. The film told the story of a rebellious suburban teenager left home alone by his parents. The image of Tom Cruise in a white shirt, sunglasses on, dancing in the living room, became a cultural icon of the 1980s. But behind that seemingly effortless moment were hours of practice, adjusting every move, every step. Cruise knew this was the biggest chance of his life so far, and he could not fail. The result? Audiences didn't just remember the film, they remembered the name Tom Cruise. One critic wrote at the time, "In Risky Business, you see the boldness of a young actor, desperate to be seen, desperate to be acknowledged." Tom Cruise brought to the screen an irresistible energy, the kind that makes you believe he's going to go very far. From a boy struggling with dyslexia, scorned at school, to a young actor ready to seize every opportunity to prove himself, Tom Cruise had laid the foundation for his journey to becoming a star, and it was only the beginning. In 1983, Tom Cruise was only 21 years old, but a fleeting moment on screen turned him from a promising actor into a name known across America. In Risky Business, Tom played Joel Goodson, a middle-class high schooler forced to confront the temptations and mistakes of youth while his parents were away. The film was humorous, but it also touched on the doubts, desires, and recklessness of an entire young American generation in the early 1980s. And then, one scene unexpectedly became a cultural icon. Joel Goodson, in a white shirt, socks, and sunglasses, danced freely in his living room to the sound of rock and roll. It wasn't a polished or carefully staged moment, even somewhat spontaneous, but it etched itself deeply into the memory of audiences. In Joel, and in Tom Cruise, people saw the image of a quintessential American boy, free, youthful, awkward, yet irresistibly charming. Later, Tom shared that the scene was hardly rehearsed at all. "I just did what I thought a teenage boy would do when home alone. I danced, I laughed, I let it all be natural. But it was precisely that naturalness that made it one of the immortal images of American cinema. When Risky Business was released, young audiences flocked to theaters. Magazines wrote about Tom Cruise as a new phenomenon. He wasn't just an actor. He became the face of what young Americans longed for. Breaking out of molds, daring to be different, and daring to dream big. One critic wrote, "Tom Cruise in Risky Business is the embodiment of American youth in the 80s. You could see yourself in him, foolish, romantic, and hungry for freedom." But Risky Business was only the beginning. 3 years later, Cruise landed the role that would change his entire career, Navy pilot Lieutenant Pete Maverick Mitchell in Top Gun, 1986. Every generation has a film that defines its youth. For America in the 1980s, it was Top Gun. And the face of Tom Cruise became inseparable from that thirst for freedom. Top Gun was not just an action movie. It was an anthem for young men who wanted to live to the fullest, to break limits, to reach for the skies. When Tom Cruise donned the flight suit, rode a motorcycle into the sunset, or piloted the F-14 Tomcat across the sky, audiences didn't just see a character. They saw a symbol of adventure and American spirit. An interesting anecdote. At first, Tom Cruise hesitated before accepting the role of Maverick. He wasn't sure a film about naval pilots could succeed. But producer Jerry Bruckheimer arranged for Tom to take a ride in a fighter jet. After that flight, Tom stepped out with an exhilarated face and said only, "I'm doing this movie." During filming, to create a sense of realism, Tom and the other actors had to fly with actual Navy pilots. Many crew members got airsick, vomited, and some couldn't continue after just a few flights. Tom also endured brutal G-forces, but instead of quitting, he insisted on flying more to adapt. He said, "The audience has to believe I was really up there, not just a special effect." The motorcycle scene on the Kawasaki GP Z900R beside the runway was also performed by Tom himself, without a stunt double. That image, along with the Ray-Ban aviator sunglasses, quickly became symbols of the era. When the film was released, Top Gun wasn't just a success, it became a cultural phenomenon. It grossed hundreds of millions of dollars and propelled Tom Cruise into the ranks of global superstars. Young American men rushed to enlist, wanting to be like Maverick, and the US Navy even set up recruitment booths in cinema lobbies. In 1986 alone, Navy enlistment soared so high that the media called Top Gun the most effective recruiting tool in the history of cinema. More importantly, Top Gun cemented the style Cruise would follow throughout his career. Roles that were both dashing and daring, an insistence on performing authentic stunts, and an undeniable screen charisma. From a boy struggling with dyslexia, from a student scorned at school, Tom Cruise had become the model of American youth. And in Maverick's blazing eyes, people glimpsed the very dream of reaching the skies that defined an entire generation. Risky Business gave him his first foothold, but it was Top Gun that made Tom Cruise a superstar. And from that moment, Hollywood would never be the same. After Top Gun, Tom Cruise became one of Hollywood's brightest stars, but the dazzling box office glow also cast a long shadow. Many began to question whether he was just a pretty face with luck, or truly had the acting talent to endure. Tom understood that pressure clearly. He once said, "I don't want the audience to only remember me as the guy riding a motorcycle into the sunset. I want them to see that I can transform into any character." And the late 1980s became the turning point to prove exactly that. In 1986, just months after Top Gun, Cruise appeared in The Color of Money, directed by the legendary Martin Scorsese. This was the sequel to the classic The Hustler, featuring the return of Paul Newman, one of America's greatest actors. Cruise played Vincent Loria, a cocky, talented young pool player who clashes with and learns from Newman's seasoned character. The film's set was a special school. Cruise often recalled spending hours simply observing Newman's performance. He never showed off, just a glance, a frown, and he could tell an entire story. Newman later admitted, "Tom was like a sponge, always absorbing. He wanted to learn. He wanted to improve." Though Newman won an Oscar for his role while Cruise received no nomination, the film revealed another side of Cruise, an actor capable of restraint and depth. It laid the foundation for what he was about to do next. In 1988, Tom Cruise teamed up with Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man. Cruise played Charlie Babbitt, a self-centered, hot-tempered man who suddenly discovers he has an autistic brother, portrayed by Hoffman. At first, all eyes were on Hoffman, a titan of acting who later won the Oscar for the role. But when the film premiered, audiences and critics were surprised. Cruise was not overshadowed. On the contrary, it was Charlie who became the heart of the story. His gradual transformation, from selfishness to empathy, from coldness to love, gave Rain Man its emotional power. One critic wrote, "Without Tom Cruise, Rain Man would have been a solo showcase for Dustin Hoffman. It's Cruise's counterbalance, his emotional journey, that made the film a masterpiece." The film swept the Oscars, winning Best Picture in 1988. And for Cruise, it was clear proof. He could stand alongside the greats, and he was not just a box office star, but the boldest step was yet to come. In 1989, Cruise starred in Born on the 4th of July, directed by Oliver Stone. The film told the true story of Ron Kovich, an American Vietnam War veteran paralyzed in combat, who became one of the nation's strongest anti-war voices. For Cruise, this role was the greatest challenge of his career so far. He had to transform from an idealistic teenager into a man whose body and spirit were crushed by war. To prepare, Tom spent months living with Kovich himself, studying his every movement, even learning to maneuver a wheelchair to ensure complete authenticity. Oliver Stone, known for his toughness, admitted, "I doubted Tom Cruise. I thought he was too handsome, too tied to the Top Gun image. But then he showed me a dedication few actors have." The result: Born on the 4th of July became a defining role. Cruise earned his first Oscar nomination and won the Golden Globe for Best Actor. On stage, he said, "I want to thank Ron Kovich, who gave me the chance to tell his story and reminded me that cinema can change the way we see the world." In just 3 years, Tom Cruise had transformed from a youth idol into a respected actor of substance. The Color of Money, Rain Man, Born on the 4th of July. 3 consecutive films proved one thing. Cruise's career was not built on looks and charm alone, but on a relentless desire to reach the truth of every character. By the end of the 1980s, the world no longer doubted. Tom Cruise was not just a pretty face at the box office. He had become one of Hollywood's most formidable actors. Entering the 1990s, Tom Cruise was already a household name worldwide. But the challenge before him was not only to maintain his status as a box office star, but also to prove that he could do it all. From political dramas and psychological films to commercial blockbusters. And the 1990s was the very decade in which Tom Cruise became not just a star, but a cultural icon. In 1992, Tom Cruise appeared in A Few Good Men, the classic courtroom drama. Cruise played military lawyer Daniel Kaffee, squaring off against Colonel Jessup, portrayed by Jack Nicholson. And cinema gained one of its most unforgettable moments. "You can't handle the truth," Nicholson's immortal line. Behind the scenes, Cruise had personally asked director Rob Reiner to rehearse his lines directly with Nicholson multiple times. He said, "I didn't want to just act. I wanted to believe I was truly going head-to-head with a colonel." When Nicholson thundered the iconic line, Cruise held his cold, unwavering gaze. Later, Nicholson admitted, "He was so focused that I felt like I was really sparring with a lawyer." With A Few Good Men, audiences saw that Cruise was not overshadowed by a legend, but stood on equal footing with Hollywood's giants. A year later, in 1993, Cruise starred in The Firm, adapted from John Grisham's best-selling novel. He played a young lawyer drawn into a whirlwind of conspiracy and corruption. The role demanded both intelligence and psychological intensity, and Cruise proved he could carry weighty, plot-driven films, not just shine with charm and glamour. The film was a resounding success, further solidifying his position. Then, in 1994, Tom Cruise entered completely new territory, Interview with the Vampire. He played Lestat, a seductive, ruthless vampire, both romantic and terrifying. At first, his casting stirred fierce controversy. Even author Anne Rice publicly opposed it, claiming he was too bright, too handsome for such a dark character. But when the film premiered, Rice herself was stunned, later publishing a public apology in Variety. "Tom Cruise astonished me. He was Lestat." On set, the cast often filmed in extremely dim lighting to create a haunting atmosphere. Cruise had to spend 3 to 4 hours daily in makeup to achieve skin that looked translucent to light, performing in near darkness where he could barely see his co-stars. That endurance gave birth to a Lestat who was both alluring and chillingly unforgettable. But Cruise's true turning point came in 1996 with Mission: Impossible. This was not just a film, it was the milestone where he transformed from actor into powerful producer. Cruise personally oversaw the project, from hiring Brian De Palma as director, to script decisions, to insisting on performing many dangerous stunts himself. The most iconic moment was the sequence where Ethan Hunt dangles in the CIA data vault. During filming, Cruise's body kept hitting the floor, ruining takes. After repeated attempts, he came up with a trick, placing coins in his shoes for perfect balance. Finally, in a single take, he hovered parallel to the ground, creating one of the most immortal images of 1990s cinema. With Mission: Impossible, Cruise launched a long-running action franchise and, more importantly, set the principle for his career. Stunts had to be real. Also in 1996, Cruise stunned audiences again with Jerry Maguire. The film told the story of a sports agent who loses everything and seeks a deeper meaning in life. Cruise delivered a character who was warm, funny, yet deeply human. And from the film came the now legendary line, "Show me the money," which exploded into American pop culture, echoed on television, in commercials, and even on football fields. Interestingly, that scene was originally just a small detail in the script. But when performing with Cuba Gooding Jr., Cruise elevated the moment, shouting, laughing, dancing, and turned it into an electrifying highlight. Director Cameron Crowe decided to keep it, never imagining it would later become a generational catchphrase. Cruise recalled, "It was one of those rare moments when you know, even while filming, this will live forever with audiences." Indeed, Jerry Maguire was not only a huge hit, but also earned Cruise another Oscar nomination, cementing his position at the peak. The 1990s proved that Tom Cruise was not only a successful actor, he was a cultural phenomenon. From tense courtrooms to the underworld of lawyers, to the darkness of vampires, then the daring of Ethan Hunt, and finally the warmth of Jerry Maguire, he showed limitless range. At that point, Hollywood no longer questioned it. Tom Cruise had become a global superstar, one who not only ruled the box office, but was respected for his dedication and seriousness toward his craft. As the new millennium began, Tom Cruise remained at the top of Hollywood. Each year he appeared in a major project, and nearly every film became a phenomenon. But at the same time, his personal life began to darken with turbulence. In 2001, Cruise starred in Vanilla Sky, the American remake of the Spanish film Abre los Ojos. It was an unusual work, part romantic story, part psychological nightmare. Cruise played David Ames, a wealthy, charming man forced to face tragedy after a horrific accident. The film contained haunting sequences, such as the moment when Times Square, usually the busiest place in the world, was completely empty, with only Tom Cruise wandering alone. That image became one of the most unforgettable moments of his career. A year later, in 2002, Cruise reunited with director Steven Spielberg for Minority Report. It was the kind of collaboration Hollywood called a studio's dream. Spielberg, the master storyteller, and Cruise, the biggest box office star. The sci-fi film about pre-crime not only exploded commercially, but also predicted technologies that later became reality. Multi-touch screens, self-driving cars. As John Anderton, Cruise delivered a performance that was both action-driven and morally conflicted. In 2003, he made a major impact with The Last Samurai. Cruise played Nathan Algren, a former American soldier who found meaning in Japanese culture and the spirit of the samurai. To prepare, Cruise spent months in Japan, training in swordsmanship, horseback riding, and grueling daily routines to embody the role authentically. One crew member recalled, "Tom arrived on set before everyone else and was the last to leave. He wanted to honor samurai culture with complete dedication." The result? The Last Samurai became both a box office hit and earned Cruise a Golden Globe nomination. These films proved that Tom Cruise remained one of the world's leading actors, a star who could transform, take risks, and devote himself fully to every role. But behind the dazzling spotlight, shadows began to appear in his personal life. Cruise's love life had been colorful from the start. His first wife was actress Mimi Rogers, whom he married in 1987 when he was just 24, and his career was on the rise. It was Mimi who introduced him to Scientology, the religion that would follow him for life. But their marriage was short, lasting only 3 years. Afterward, Mimi once quipped, "Maybe he thought he needed a more perfect wife." Not long after, Tom met Nicole Kidman on the set of Days of Thunder, 1990. Nicole was only 22, still very young, but quickly became his partner throughout the 1990s. They married, adopted 2 children, Isabella and Connor, and became Hollywood's golden couple. Together, they starred in Far and Away, and later Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. To the public, they looked like a perfect family, the world's most powerful movie star and his beautiful, talented wife. But in early 2001, Cruise suddenly filed for divorce, just days after their 10th wedding anniversary. The shock rattled all of Hollywood. Nicole later admitted bitterly, "I thought I'd grow old with him, but everything collapsed so quickly." While the true reason was never disclosed, many believed Scientology played a major role in their split. After the heartbreak, Tom Cruise entered another high-profile relationship with Katie Holmes, the young star of Dawson's Creek. In early 2005, the world watched as Cruise declared his love in a way so passionate it seemed bizarre. The infamous moment when he jumped on Oprah Winfrey's couch, shouting, "I'm in love," became a media joke, mocked for decades afterward. A year later, Katie gave birth to their daughter Suri, and the couple held a fairy tale wedding at a castle in Italy. But this marriage, too, was short-lived. Just a few years later, Holmes filed for divorce and won custody of Suri, severing nearly all ties with Scientology. Beyond his romances, Cruise's religious devotion also thrust him into controversy. As a fervent Scientologist, he began making shocking public statements. The peak came in 2005, when he denounced antidepressant use and declared that psychiatry is a pseudoscience. The remarks outraged the American public, and the media began questioning the sanity of one of the world's biggest stars. A critic wrote, "The brightest light casts the darkest shadow." Tom Cruise entered the 2000s with a blazing career, but his private life and beliefs made the public doubtful. This was the period when audiences' trust in Cruise began to waver. He was still a major star, his films still successful, but the glow was now shaded by controversy. And it was precisely this duality, the devoted movie star on screen versus the contentious figure off-screen, that made Tom Cruise one of the most complex personalities in early 21st century Hollywood. After the controversy-filled early 2000s, Tom Cruise seemed to be abandoned by Hollywood. Some studios hesitated to put his name on posters, the press kept attacking him, and audiences began to drift away. But there was one thing Tom Cruise never did: give up. And the very thing that became the springboard for his rebirth was the Mission Impossible franchise. In 1996, Tom Cruise first stepped into the role of Ethan Hunt, a character both intelligent and daring, always willing to push himself to the limit. The film was a massive success, and from then on, Mission Impossible became inseparable from Cruise's name. But it wasn't until the late 2000s that the series truly became his weapon of rebirth. In 2011, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol was released, and Tom Cruise decided to do something few would dare: perform the stunt of climbing the exterior of the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. No stunt double, no CGI, just Tom Cruise, safety cables, and the sheer glass wall of a Dubai skyscraper. Behind the scenes, when the crew suggested using a stuntman, Tom simply shook his head and said, "If I don't do it, the audience will know, and they won't believe in Ethan Hunt anymore." The result: that sequence became one of the most iconic moments in action cinema history. Audiences around the world held their breath as they watched Tom dangling outside the 828-meter tower, where the smallest mistake could have meant disaster. That image single-handedly revived his career. But it wasn't just the Burj Khalifa. Cruise kept raising his own standard for action. In Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation 2015, he clung to the side of a massive Airbus A400M as it took off, literally hanging onto the plane thousands of feet in the air. Once again, no CGI, no stunt double. Everything was real. One critic once wrote, "Every time Hollywood doubts him, Tom Cruise answers with an impossible stunt." And indeed, that became the philosophy Cruise turned into his personal brand. In an era where audiences are accustomed to CGI, Tom Cruise delivers something rare: authenticity. People believe him because they know he really jumps, really climbs, really hangs suspended in midair. That willingness to risk everything made audiences forget the controversies in his personal life and see only a dedicated actor willing to sacrifice it all for cinema. As a result, Mission: Impossible not only restored Cruise's status as a superstar, but also opened a new era for action films. Ethan Hunt was no longer just a character. He became living proof of Tom Cruise's perseverance and his relentless drive to push beyond all limits. From being doubted by Hollywood, Cruise rose back to the very top. And this time, he was no longer just a movie star. He was an action legend, a man who dared to do what the world thought impossible. After reclaiming his status with Mission: Impossible, Ghost Protocol, and Rogue Nation, Tom Cruise entered the phase of cementing his legacy. This was no longer just about being an action star, but about the question: what will he leave behind for cinema? In 2018, Mission: Impossible Fallout was released and was immediately hailed as the best installment of the entire series. Cruise, already past 55, still performed terrifying stunts himself. A halo jump from 25,000 feet, piloting a helicopter through a canyon, and sprinting across London rooftops in a race against time. A set accident left him with a broken ankle, but only weeks later, Cruise was back, running and leaping until the scene was complete. That was a level of dedication almost unheard of in modern Hollywood. But Tom Cruise's legacy is not confined to Mission: Impossible. It also comes from a film no one thought would ever be revived: Top Gun: Maverick, 2022. Nearly 40 years after the original, Cruise returned as Maverick, no longer the reckless young man, but a seasoned veteran carrying memories and responsibility. From the very beginning, Cruise set a new standard. Every actor playing a pilot had to undergo real training, had to truly fly inside fighter jets. Not a single scene was replaced by CGI. The result was footage so authentic that audiences felt as though they themselves were in the cockpit, soaring with Maverick across the sky. When Top Gun: Maverick hit theaters, the world was stunned. The film not only shattered box office records, grossing nearly $1.5 billion, but also accomplished something few films had managed in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. It brought audiences back to theaters. People called Tom Cruise the savior of the box office because he proved that the collective cinematic experience, sitting in the dark, holding your breath through each sequence, still held its power. One critic remarked, "Top Gun: Maverick is not just a movie, it is a love letter to the audience, and Tom Cruise is the one who wrote it." Now, in his 60s, Tom Cruise continues to hurl himself into stunts that would intimidate even younger actors. He not only sustains his own star power, but also reminds Hollywood of cinema's core strengths: dedication, authenticity, and an unyielding passion. From a boy struggling with dyslexia to a superstar once doubted by Hollywood, and back to the top through sheer risk-taking and relentless drive, Tom Cruise's journey proves that light and shadow, glory and turbulence all can shape a legend. And looking back, perhaps every generation of audiences carries a memory tied to Tom Cruise. The 80s with Top Gun, the 90s with Jerry Maguire or Mission Impossible, and today with Top Gun Maverick. As for Tom Cruise, he still hasn't stopped. And maybe only when he no longer runs, no longer flies, no longer hangs suspended in midair, will the world finally believe that his journey has come to an end. More than 4 decades have passed, and from a small boy in Syracuse, New York, Tom Cruise has written a journey few could ever match. He rose from family shadows and early doubts to the dazzling glory of becoming one of the greatest movie stars in history. There were times when the public turned its back, times when controversies threatened to sink him. But as Ethan Hunt once said in Mission Impossible, there's no such thing as impossible. Cruise proved that not only on screen, but in his own life. And today, when we look back, we don't just see an action star. We see an artist, devoted to every frame, living for the audience, and never stopping his run forward. The brightest light always comes with the deepest shadow. But it is precisely that blend that forged the legend of Tom Cruise, a star in whom every generation can find a piece of their youth. And this story is not yet over. If you've ever held your breath watching Tom Cruise dangle from the Burj Khalifa, or smiled with emotion as Maverick took flight once more, then join us as we continue the journey of exploring Hollywood's legends. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because many more stories behind the screen are waiting for you to relive.